Are we living in a cosmos as we imagine it, or in a highly evolved computer simulation of that universe, which even stimulates our own consciousness? What's the difference between the two, and how can we detect the difference? Or like Neo, are we trapped in a Matrix-style computer simulation of reality produced by more evolved, possibly post-human beings? Almost probably, at least according to the data, which ranges from reasonable, semi-plausible to maybe not so plausible. Are we living in a simulation? If you also find yourselves asking these questions, then you're finally in the right place. Watch this video ahead to find answers to your questions as we discuss the possibilities of Matrix. Hello guys, and welcome back to NFT Insights. Today in this video, we reveal the answers to the most sophisticated questions about simulation and why Elon Musk thinks we will soon be living in a simulation. So make sure to stay with us until the end. This is going to be a very exciting ride. That said, let's begin. Is the world we live in real or virtual reality, as characters locked inside a video game created by a space alien? That may sound like a question you'd hear at a midnight showing of The Matrix, but it's just become a hot topic in academia. Elon Musk, the CEO of SpaceX, is a high-profile supporter of the simulation hypothesis, which he recently discussed in an interview for a famous podcast. Games will eventually be indistinguishable from our reality, Musk said, before concluding, "We're most likely in a simulation." "I believe there are numerous simulations," he added. "You may name them reality or multiverse," said Musk. Musk also informed Rogan that the substrate upon which the simulations are operating, whatever it is probably rather uninteresting, at least in comparison to the simulations themselves. "Why would you create a monotonous simulation? You'd develop a simulation that's a lot more exciting than base reality," Musk added, citing the distillations of what's interesting about life that humans created in video games and movies. Throughout their chat, Musk and Rogan sipped whiskey. At one point, the comedian smoked a joint and Musk took a puff. The SpaceX CEO stated he hardly or rarely smokes marijuana and doesn't enjoy it since it reduces his famed productivity. Astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson agrees, stating that the simulation hypothesis has better than 50-50 odds of being right. In an email to NBC News Mark, he said, "I wish I could summon a solid argument against it, but I can't find any." Nick Bostrom's 2003 paper kicked off the present attack against reality. In it, the University of Oxford philosopher laid down some hard logic. If there are long-lived technological civilizations in the solar system, and if they run computer simulations, there must be a massive number of simulated realities, complete with artificial intelligence inhabitants, who may have no clue that they are living inside a game. Perhaps inhabitants like us. These beings may believe they are real, yet they have no physical form, and simply live in a simulation. "We are very likely living in a computer simulation," Bostrom said, "if computer-loving aliens really exist." The brains of folks like Tyson and Musk were subsequently blown. Scientists are now looking for a means to test the simulation idea. Bostrom is looking forward to seeing more tangible examples of his concept. Experiments that could tell the difference between physical reality and a simulation would be required for it to be a genuine assertion, he told Mark. A computer scientist at the University of Texas at Austin, Scott Aronson, is more forthright about the implications of such studies. "If there were defects in the computer that runs our reality, like in the Matrix movies," he explains, "they could have obviously detectable impacts. God emerging in a thundercloud could be quite excellent empirical proof in favor of religion," says the author. "Bugs like this would have to be exceedingly subtle in our Matrix environment, otherwise we would have seen them by now." Silas Bean, a nuclear physicist at the University of Washington in Seattle, believes that by exposing the mathematical structure utilized to construct our virtual reality, we may be able to ferret out previously unnoticed defects. He points out that experts in his discipline replicate the behavior of subatomic particles using a lattice-like set of coordinates. Perhaps the aliens did as well. There would be a basic coarseness to our reality if it were built on top of lattice, because no details in our mock universe could be smaller than the resolution of that simulations. Bean claims that even if the resolution limit is too narrow for direct observation, we may be able to detect it empirically. Bean posits that a simulated lattice could impact the behaviors of ultra-energetic particles known as cosmic rays, influencing their orientation and maximum intensity in a work he co-authored with two others. Cosmic rays slam into the Earth's atmosphere from deep space, and devices like the telescope array, a network of 500 detectors spread across 300 square miles of Utah desert, keep an eye on them. Particles up to 100 quintillion times more energetic than visible light have already been identified by the detectors. That appears to be an excellent location to begin looking for flaws in any simulation. It'd be a difficult task. High-energy cosmic rays are uncommon, and the differences from regular physical effects may be subtle. However, Bean and his team are optimistic that such a measurement is possible, at least in theory. The authors add, there is always the opportunity for the simulated to discover the simulators. Do you guys know about all this, and what do you think? Are we living in a simulation? Tell us in the comment section. Looking internally rather than outward is another technique to seek for simulation flaws. Thomas Campbell, a former NASA engineer, and his colleagues argue that human video game creators often maximize the effectiveness of their programming by producing only the elements of the virtual world that gamers can view in a recently proposed test. If our Matrix controllers are similarly focused on efficiency, they may be rigorous about replicating details while we're viewing an event, but allow a more flexible simulation approach when they think no one is watching. Campbell is pursuing this line of thought by concentrating on sensitive quantum physics experiments where holes in the simulation may be most apparent. He devised a number of tabletop optics setup that would fire a laser beam through a complex series of slits, mirrors, and detectors. Laser light photons would take different trajectories depending on whether they behave like waves or like particles, which is determined by the setup's structure. Or to put it another way, it should only be dependent on the arrangement. Campbell theorizes that if reality is generated at the time we're watching, his experiment could give hitherto unthinkable effects, such as the ability to forecast whether an individual photon would pass through or bounce back when it encounters a half-reflective mirror. He writes that this result would provide an unmistakable indicator that our reality must be manufactured. Campbell says that the experiment could also explain why events in quantum physics appear to be impacted by the observer in an odd way. It's possible that it's a quirk of the simulation we're living in rather than a basic component of reality. These attempts to outsmart the Matrix, according to Marcus Nowak, a computational physicist at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab who's interested in the simulation concept, have flaws. Campbell, for example, considers that a simulation is solely for our advantage. But what if the simulator isn't just simulating us for our benefit, but rather to monitor how everything plays out? Nowak further points out that Bean's strategy might fail if the lattice of reality is too fine for us to discern, or if the crafty simulations have built-in algorithms to evade whatever test we perform. The bottom line, according to Nowak, is that testing the simulation idea as a whole is impossible. The best we can hope for is that the designers are too lazy or disinterested to prevent us from discovering their work, so we can explore a restricted neighborhood of ideas on how the simulation might work. That assessment appears to be a mashup of the worst aspects of both worlds. We don't know if we're living in a simulation, but even if the possibility of being in one sounds awful. It's a disturbing thought, Tyson says. It seems to generate a sense of total need, according to Bostrom. However, there are several constructive approaches to the simulation idea. It's a new way for Aronson to think about the odd riddles of where our world comes from, who or what created it, and why. Nowak also thinks it's a good problem to think about where human research might go. He explains, I mimic various events that represent only a small portion of all physical things that are going on around us. I am curious about the computational work and computer required for a simulation. Because of the rapid advancement of AI research and computer modeling, we may one day be able to develop our own hyper-realistic simulations with self-aware digital entities. That idea is both enthralling and terrifying. It also adds a set of mind-numbing questions to the mix. Is this the end of the simulations within simulations, or may our simulated beings move on to develop a new layer of simulation and so on? If there was limitless serial computing capacity accessible at the bottom level and on each upper level, Bostrom argues, there could be an infinite stack of simulations. As far as we can tell, the serial processing power accessible to a simulator in our universe is finite, in which instance we could only develop finitely many levels of simulations, he says. Phew, so that's a little consolation. We might be in a simulation or a simulation within a simulation, but at least we know it's not a series of simulations. And that brings us to the end of today's video. Make sure to subscribe to our channel, NFT Insights, for more such exciting content. See you soon in our next video.